Thank you. To the Chair. As you're aware, the HDSB received a formal request from a community member to consider renaming Iroquois Ridge High School. The board's school naming governance procedure indicates that the director shall forward renaming requests and rationale to the board, and where it appears that the request meets the criteria established in the governance procedure, an estimate of the cost of renaming the school will also be provided. Staff have reviewed the submitted rationale and have determined that it meets the criteria for initiating a review of the school name as outlined in the governance procedure. The recommendation provided in this report is in alignment with the HDSB multi-year plan, the HDSB Indigenous Education Policy, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action. We have consulted with our treaty partner, who has expressed support for the recommendation and receives the action in the spirit of raising awareness and a step towards reconciliation. The HDSB's Indigenous Rights and Education, Human Rights, Equity, and Inclusion team, as well as our Human Rights and Equity Advisor, also support the name change. To avoid perpetuating further harm, I do want to highlight that our role here this evening is to not debate or negotiate the current name of the school, as it has already been confirmed to be inappropriate. We are here tonight because we received a formal request from a community member that meets the criteria established in the board's school naming governance procedure and is in alignment with the many policies, reports, and legal documents previously mentioned, which our board, local, provincial, and federal organizations are guided by.
Superintendent Proto, do you wish to add anything? Okay. I can certainly appreciate the research you've done to determine that Iroquois Ridge meets the criteria for a school renaming process. I am mindful of both the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, as well as our own multi-year plan. One of the commitments of our multi-year plan is Indigenous perspectives and awareness, which calls us to promote knowledge and understanding of Indigenous realities, and specifically to provide opportunities for a whole community approach to understanding the impacts of colonialism, past and present, foster engagement with Indigenous peoples, communities, practices, perspectives, and realities to build awareness, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. Enhance learning about treaty relationships, Indigenous rights, residential schools, and Indigenous peoples' contributions to Canada to fulfill the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action for education. It is important for us as treaty partners to seek out and understand the lived realities of the Indigenous peoples of this land. And so now I would like to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the board initiate the renaming process for the secondary school at 1123 Glen Ashton Drive, Oakville, in accordance with the board's naming and renaming school policy and governance procedure. Trustee Rocha, would you make this motion?
I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Trustee Gray, would you second the motion?
Yes.
And I see we do have a speaker on the list, so please, if you do wish to speak, put your name on the list. And I believe as mover that Trustee Rocha does get priority to go first. Trustee Zhang, if you would mind me going with her first. Thank you. Go ahead, Trustee Rocha.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I appreciate the additional information that was shared with us this evening, but none of that was incorporated into the report. So when I read this report and when the public reads the report, it's incomplete. And so we're being asked to vote on a report that was incomplete. And for that alone, I don't feel comfortable at all making a decision on what's presented in this report. The other thing I want to raise is that although I understand that the word Iroquois is deemed derogatory, the school is named Iroquois Ridge. And I don't see any history in why it was named Iroquois Ridge. So that would have been helpful in this process. And I think it goes to any time the board receives a request to rename a school, it would be helpful to get a very fulsome picture of why it was named it in the first place, why it is deemed to be derogatory, which treaty partners were consulted. And with a price tag of $250,000, that's $250,000. And to me, that's extreme considering we've got to balance a budget we're trying to salvage $8 million next year. So there's a lot of things that are flashing red lights. So, and the other thing is Iroquois Ridge High School is next door to the Iroquois Ridge Community Center. And I think that if consideration is going to be given to rename a high school, we should definitely speak with our treaty partners, but we should also speak with the town of Oakville, because it's not just our school that's impacted. There are other buildings, streets. There are a lot of things named Iroquois. Iroquois Shore, Iroquois Ridge, there's a lot of stuff. So the impact goes beyond. So based on everything I've just said, I do propose to make a motion after all my other fellow trustees speak, because I do see that there's a speaker's list. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Rocha. And now I will go to Trustee Zhang.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to say, because I work in Toronto office today, so I'm not aware of any updated information. When I read the report, what I can see is the report just lists all the regulations and the laws and guidelines. It doesn't say what is the reason and which article I can check with what the problem is. So first is why we need to change the name. I didn't see from the report. It's not clearly articulated in the report. The other one, why it is the urgency. The urgency also is not very clear. Why we need to do it today? Because we have the deficit, so we need to. We have a lot of things very important we need to do. This is the cost we also need to consider. Is it the right time? And this is the question. Also, like Trustee Rocha said, if we want to do, because you are the local trustee, you know more about the local community. If you believe that a study is needed, so I will support you. But as we can see in the next few months, we will have operational plan, the budget, and the CIAC and MYP. A lot of important items is on the list. Do we really have the time to have an additional committee? So this is all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any response? Superintendent Proto.
Thank you, through the chair, to the trustees. We have, as stated in the original comments, consulted with our treaty partners and our Indigenous Studies Department. And so to speak to a few of the things that you're bringing up, there are several other things in Oakville specifically that are named Iroquois, and many, if not, well, all of them outside of the school name are out of our purview. So we have a responsibility to speak to our school name, but we can't manage what other people are calling things, roads, community centers, things like that. So we might actually be leading the way in being the people that are supporting the Indigenous people. The cost may have an initial price tag of $250,000, but a lot of that cost would come through schools anyway. When you're rebranding, renaming a school, which we've done before and we've seen, some of those things are new school shirts, which we reorder every year, the gym floor, which is a big expense, but is redone multiple times. So when you're redoing that, that's part of the cost that's built in here. So they're not costs isolated to this. They're costs that would have been incurred anyway, but are part of the renaming that you put into one big picture. But lastly, the discussion as to why. In consulting with our treaty partners, they pointed out that the term is derogatory, the term is offensive, and anti-Indigenous sentiment is systemic. And I do appreciate that Trustee Collard brought up residential schools. To know that it is an upsetting term to our Indigenous partners or treaty partners, and that they have stated that, is something that we have to rely on and trust, and to debate, to bring it up, to discuss, only causes further harm. We have partners for a reason. We have built trust with these partners, and to debate the discussion brings up the term, brings up a lot of harm that is unnecessary, because we do believe what they say, and they have a lived experience that we can't begin to understand. Lastly, I see this name change as a crisis-opportunity, great term that I've learned and used many times. When you change the name of a school, the ability for the school to come together and bond over what that name will be and how to rebrand and how to refocus and how to come together as one community to really support that is something I've seen as really powerful work, as well as really deep learning as to what systemic anti-Indigenous work has looked like in the past and how to be supportive of calls to action. So that hopefully addresses a couple of the things that were brought up here.
Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So as the trustee for probably the most recently renamed school, McQuindam, similar situation that the park next to the school also had a different name prior to the name change. And we did collaborate with the city and they did change that name. So I do think, as Superintendent Procho said, it is an opportunity to, I don't necessarily look at it as leading the way, but build those relationships to look at how you have those discussions and move forward with that. And I'm struggling with this one little piece because I don't know if this is when to talk about it or if we talk about it when we start looking at the name change. Because again, I know that 250,000 sticker shock is a pretty big deal, but I'm wondering, because from my knowledge, and because I didn't ever know this before, is that they all call the school the Ridge. So in looking at a change, could we just, and I don't know, is this part of looking at a name change or is this something that we can do to expedite? Could we not just take that word away and just call it the Ridge? Which to me, I don't know. So just a suggestion that might be less costly. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the suggestion, Trustee Shuttleworth. Certainly that would be a part of what flows from this meeting in terms of the ad hoc committee being formed according to the governance procedure. And any derivation of the name currently would be a part of the new name suggestions that would come forward to trustee for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Amos.
Thank you. So I think I'm probably one of the only ones that may have been around when Iroquois Ridge was named. So it was named after the land it was built on. The area used to be an ancient shoreline of Lake Iroquois, which was a glacial lake formed in the last ice age about 12,000 years ago. When the lake receded south to Lake Ontario, it left behind a ridge which was comprised of hill and forest. So when the school was built, it was named after the land it was situated on. So that is the history of the name, and I'm guessing the lake was named after our Indigenous partners. That would be my guess. So I am not against exploring changing the name because I believe we have to create those partnerships. My concern is the cost, and I did speak to Superintendent Nagoy, and she did say the cost was much lower for McQuindam, but because it's a high school and there are things involved such as changing school floors and things like that, that could be part of what the cost. So apparently it's strictly an estimate, and depending on if they do keep the name such as the Ridge, they could keep their team names such as Trailblazers, and there may not be as much change needed as, so just to put it out there.
Thank you very much, Trustee Amos. Trustee Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I see, like I heard the explanation by Superintendent Collin, and I think if it is derogatory and disrespectful for Indigenous people, then we should strongly think about moving forward. But if Trustee Rocha wants to bring a motion to defer, I would support her motion. But as our Superintendent said, more debate is only going to hurt the sentiments. So I'm torn here. I don't know what to do, but I would say like a proper decision is taken. I am all in support of changing the name, and I know how the costs work, and hopefully it's not going to come up to $250,000. But still, if it is seriously hurting a community that we love and respect and we partner with, we should move ahead with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Ahmed. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you to the Director. Dr. Ennis, we've heard a lot tonight about what it could mean to the community and the impact on the community and the possibly come out of nowhere. But we've also heard some really, really good reasoning about not damaging our partners. So we've been looking at it from the community's perspective and our partners' perspective. But as the head of the organization, my question to you is that when we look at that umbrella piece as the whole corporation, could you speak to the cost versus reputational damage versus the community uprest, just in that more general piece for us on that far-reaching governing piece that we have in terms of your thoughts on this?
Thank you for the question, Trustee Daniele. I see it resting in our commitment in the multi-year plan to Indigenous perspectives and awareness, understanding our work with our treaty partners. When I look at the governance procedure, it's quite clear to me that a request came forward. The rationale was given that met the criteria according to our procedures, that this certainly was an appropriation and a derogatory one at that, that requires us to take action. It met the criteria. That criteria was included in the rationale provided to the Board of Trustees. It is then up to the Board of Trustees to make the change. I think if we defer it, I do worry that our treaty partners will be further harmed by this. I do support what Superintendent Proto said earlier, because we did our homework before we brought this forward. And so just to make sure that we were, having the right mindset. And so I see it as continuously damaging and hurtful and harmful to the board as a whole. Should we continue with this after we've been told that this is harmful and hurtful, and should we choose to defer it? I do understand the concerns that were put forward on the table tonight. I, however, do not think that, I think that's part of the conversation that we have as we work through the change process.
And in your role as the financial steward of the board, would you mind speaking to the budget piece of it and the investment of the $250,000?
I do believe, and I know that we are in a $7.7 million deficit position, and we are certainly working through that diligently, trying to find efficiencies and trying to be as effective as we can with every dollar. Certainly, $250,000 in the larger context of the budget is really a small amount in terms of the budget as a whole. I know it seems like a large amount in isolation, but as a budget, it really is a 0.000 percentage. And so I think that we, through the various, whether it's facilities, various other line items in the budget, we can certainly find that without further impacting or damaging the work that we will need to do to support students from a budgetary standpoint next year.
Thank you. Trustee Baxter.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm disappointed, I have to say, around this conversation that a report, as I would agree with Trustee Rocha, was very, very light on information, and trustees are being asked to make a decision that has what I feel is a significant financial impact. The day after we had a SEAC meeting in which members of the committee heard that there are potentially cuts to special education coming. And I'm, like I said, a little bit disappointed that the conversation is now being framed in terms of our respect for our treaty partners, which I have the utmost respect, not only for our treaty partners, but for our obligation to respect and to work towards reconciliation. I didn't hear any objection or concern around the table about changing a name that is hurtful and harmful, But I think the reality of being a trustee, and certainly the least fun part of the job, and for any board member on any organization, is that we have a financial responsibility. And this is, unfortunately, triaging is just part of our job. And so it is unfortunate that we are now having this discussion. And like I said, I don't think there's anyone in this board who would disagree that we need to move forward in reconciliation, and we have to change the names of buildings that were misnamed and in very hurtful ways. But like I said, there's a financial impact. It's not negligible from what I'm seeing in the line items that we're considering for efficiencies. So I am concerned about doing this now, and would be certainly in support of deferring if my colleagues around the table would agree, with a firm commitment and reiteration to our treaty partners and the community as a whole that this is a priority. But we also have to prioritize special education and student-facing services. Thank you.
Thank you. First-time speaker, Trustee Bryden.
Thank you, Chair. The one thought that is bubbling through my head is that this is a one-time cost. And in the framework that was presented to us, we have been looking at separations between a structural deficit, which are ongoing costs, and one-time costs, and trying to avoid going into things that are not yet public. There is the possibility that this could arrive from accumulated surplus, could be covered from accumulated surplus in a way that ongoing costs cannot be in the short run. So it is possible that this may not impact at all our existing commitments to others, but would come out of accumulated surplus.
Thank you. Now moving on to second-time speakers, Tanya Rocha, Trustee Rocha.
Yeah, thank you. So through the chair, when we renamed McQuendam, I recall Trustee Shuttleworth and I asking or talking about it at Committee of the Whole to senior staff, and there was sort of a unwritten recommendation that senior staff were going to look at all of our school names to determine which ones were harmful. And perhaps Iroquois Ridge would have been on that list. So when this report came out on Friday, I called Margot and I said, whatever happened to that team that was looking at our list of names? Because to this date, we've never received that list. And no, it wasn't a motion, but it was more of a verbal commitment saying, yep, we're going to look at it. Because if we're changing McQuendam, we really need to look at the big picture of all of our schools. So to date, we haven't received that report. So when I look at this school naming request, what's to say next week we're not going to get another email, and 2 months from now we get another email. So what my intention is, I'm not saying don't rename it. I'm saying is that this report was incomplete. It shouldn't have come to board the way it was written. All of the additional verbiage we heard tonight should have been in the report. And so with that, I do want to put a motion on the floor, but I do understand that there are a couple of other speakers. So what I'll do is I'll let the other speakers speak, and then I will be putting a motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Rocha. Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'm going to say it's probably to the director. So this motion is asking to initiate a renaming process, which to me is initiating a conversation. Correct? So I'm just checking, because what my wonderings are right now is having the conversation doesn't tell us what the outcome's going to be. So although I recognize the concerns around the report, but at the same time, if this is just starting a conversation, starting it sooner rather than later, to me, seems important. So, but I'm just wondering, this is not saying we are renaming the school. This is saying we are having a discussion around what to do about the school's name.
So, thank you so much, Chair Shuttleworth, through the chair.
Nope.
No. Okay. Muscle memory, thank you.
Yes, we'll let you read
Trustee Shuttleworth, through Chair Collard, certainly this is the start of the conversation. That's why we're here. The conversation, we're not renaming any schools tonight. So that's quite clear. We cannot do that. We have a process that engages a ad hoc committee that would then take work away, bring back some recommendations, and even then, there would be further conversations about, the final decision making. So this engages us in a protracted period of conversations, consultation, and engagement. So that's tonight is just the start of it, and it's certainly up to the Board of Trustees to determine whether we want to continue with this conversation or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Baxter.
Thank you, through the chair. So my question, I guess, as a follow-up, Director Ennis, is why is there a cost associated? The way the report is written is such that it appears that trustees are voting for a motion for which the report attached has a dollar amount. And that, for me personally, and I think others have expressed, is the sticking point and is the concern. It's not the renaming or the idea behind it. So would it be possible to bring a motion this evening to approve the start of the process, but the actual cost and approval of the expenditure come later at such time that we could consider the timing of that? Because it feels like we're rolling too many decisions into one report that, as Trustee Rocha mentioned, was a bit light on information.
Thank you for the commented question, Trustee Baxter. It's certainly the reason and the rationale why the cost is there is because it is directly written into the procedure. It asked us to make sure that we do that. That's a part of the, the report. It said you should bring a report and also estimate what do you think this might cost you. So that frames part of the conversation that we're having tonight in terms of the decision making that trustees will have to make. But Superintendent Proto, you wanted to add something?
Point of clarification. The motion we have before us is to initiate the renaming process, which means if we vote yes, a committee will be established and the school will be renamed. That's what this means. So there isn't further discussion on anything. It's to initiate the renaming process means that a committee will be formed with trustees, community members, staff members to start the renaming process. So there is no further discussion. It's a done deal. It's going to be renamed. That's what this means. Is that not what this means?
It means that the conversation has started. We will then bring back names. Trustees, ultimately, correct me, Manager Khan, trustees do have the final authority whether to accept or reject in the final analysis.
If I could provide a little bit of clarification. So the motion as it reads is to start the renaming process as outlined in the governance procedure. This is following that process. So if the Board of Trustees tonight decide to initiate that process, the committee will take the question back. They will seek community input. They will create a short list and bring that short list to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees then has the decision to make as to whether or not they would like to retain the name or whether or not they would like to consider renaming it based on whatever rationale is provided. So it's not, ultimately the decision to rename is not tonight. It's to start the process to look at whether or not the name will ultimately change.
And I would like to add to that, that there's also in the GP the ability for trustees to say when they get the renaming report with the suggested shortlist, we don't like any of these shortlisted names, go back and do your work again. So there are many opportunities for trustees to reject a renaming at that point in time. Trustee Baxter, did you have more to say?
I guess then following that, is the commitment to spend the money and when that process would happen, is that included in that motion? That's what I'm trying to do. So as I framed it, we're in a deficit. So are we as trustees saying two things tonight? Not only that, yes, we approve moving forward to rename the school, which I think I'm personally in support of, but also go ahead and spend the money ASAP. So so if the names come back and there is a suitable one and trustees do choose a new name, is there going to be a step in which when that work will be done will be decided? Because as I said, depending what the cost is, we may have to make some difficult decisions around spending the money on that at that time or deferring that spend to a time when the board can afford it.
When the motion comes forward from staff indicating a short list of names, trustees can amend that motion to say that this action will take place 6 months from now, a year from now. We can amend any motion that we like, or even substitute a motion if we wish. There are plenty of opportunities for trustees to change what is in front of them on the board report to be something that they deem to be better, more well-suited, preferable, and majority of trustees around the table voting for or against an item is what dictates what happens. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Superintendent Proto.
Through the chair, speaking to the cost, because I experienced this along with Trustee Shuttleworth and some others with McQuendam, and looking at the time of year that we're at right now, if the motion goes forward to rename the school and to respect what we've heard from our treaty partners in that we do make that commitment to our multi-year plan and to the hurt and harm we've caused and we want to repair that, the actual cost would not be until next year. This renaming process takes some time. And you would want a school to come together to talk about how to build out a plan with all stakeholders and full voice. Even further, if the name chosen was another Indigenous name, which we can't predict at this time because there's a lot that happens between now and then, you have to include the treaty partners in that aspect as well. So you want the learning to be embedded. Again, back to this is a really fantastic teachable moment and not a single dime would be spent. What they would do is not move forward probably in purchasing anything else that has the current school name. So the sooner that you can put this in place, the more that they will stop spending. That would end up being a waste of money. But then it wouldn't start until next year that they would look at it. And then second, as mentioned before, it's not a standalone cost of whatever it ends up being, $250, $260, that's a very rough estimate. A lot of those costs are incurred anyway. So a lot of those are already built into multiple budgets within the school, outside of the school, for upgrading the school. So it is a one-time thing for part of it, and others, this would just be part of what was spent within the budget that already exists.
Thank you. And I think we're now down to final speaker, Trustee Rocha.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, I still haven't received a response, and I don't know if I'm going to get one tonight about the commitment to look at all of our names. The other thing I wanted to add is, was it a member of the Indigenous community who made this request? Do we know that?
So we do not have any permission to share at this time the name of the person who made the request.
Okay.
And with respect to your I didn't know you asked a question about the names. I thought you were just commenting.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I can respond to that. Certainly, you know, I do remember the conversation about looking at all school names. It's not an exercise that I think we should, you know, embark on at this time. I mean, for many of the reasons that have been cited here, if you think doing one school is, you know, financially irresponsible at this time, think about doing tens of schools. It would be an enormous cost. I think the process we have in place to look at things as they come up, I think is a good one. And I think that's the way that we should continue as a board.
Trustee Rocha, do you have further
Yeah,
comment?
I'm going to continue.
Okay.
So on one hand, I'm hearing that it's irresponsible for us to go ahead and change all of our names. And on the other hand, I'm hearing that we should make amends quickly. So it's two opposing ideas there. With that note, I did say I was going to make a motion, and so I'd like to move a motion. I did share my motion with everyone via email, so if you'd like to follow along, that would be great. So I move to refer the motion to an ad hoc committee to further research the Iroquois Ridge High School renaming request and report back to the board no later than December 31st, 2024. The purpose of the committee is to research the history of the name and to consult with local partners, including Indigenous treaty partners, as well as the town of Oakville. The committee of 4 to 7 members should be composed of the Oakville Ward 6 trustee, up to 1 additional trustee, the superintendent of education for Iroquois Ridge High School, 1 to 2 members of the communications team, and 1 to 2 members of the Indigenous rights and education team. And I so move.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Trustee Baxter, thank you. Now, that means that everyone that currently on the speakers list, we are now looking at a motion to defer. So if you wish to speak to deferral, I'm going to write down your names and I'm going to clear the list, and then we can get everyone to, do you want to remove yourself? This is about the deferral? Okay. If you wish to speak to the deferral, I'm resetting so that everyone will be a first-time speaker. Please press your button and we can speak to the deferral. Vice Chair Oliver.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. So in my limited research of this term, I have learned that it is a derogatory name. The report states as much, and the report clearly outlines the reasons and the moral grounds for changing the name, including national and international statutes. A derogatory term is a derogatory term. I do not need to research it further. So we're also hearing from our Indigenous partners, elders, the Indigenous education advisors about the importance of changing the name to align with the Indigenous perspectives, origins, and history. So what more do we need in order to take action? I appreciate that we are in a deficit position, but I think Superintendent Proto spoke to that. Thank you. And delaying this action, what message does it send to our Indigenous partners about HDSB's values and about our commitment to one of our multi-year plan commitments, which specifically is dedicated to Indigenous perspectives and awareness? Further, to pick up on Superintendent Proto's opportunity regarding a teachable moment, I am also aware that there is a local project underway aligned with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. This is an Oakville project called, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Debwewen, the Oakville Truth Project. It is a community approach to truth and reconciliation between Mississauga's Credit First Nation and Oakville. It's based on the allyship and reciprocity of the original treaties. It seems to me that respecting a call to remove a derogatory term from the name of one of our schools, the HDSB as an education community, would be doing its part in taking meaningful steps to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action in the education system. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Amos.
Thank you. I have a few concerns with the actual motion. I believe I actually explained the history of the name, so I'm not sure what more can be really researched into it because there wasn't a lot more to it. And the town of Oakville, I believe, named their facilities because of the school that was in the area. So if we change the name, they may follow, but that's up to them. But the two don't go hand in hand. I mean, the town does what they want to do, and we will do what we want to do. So those two pieces of the motion, and I also don't know that we need to wait till the end of December 2024. So anyways, I just wanted to bring those points out.
Thank you. Trustee Shuttleworth.
And I'll just be really quick, because I look at this motion and I understand and I recognize the concerns about the cost. But when I look at this motion, I almost wonder, are those not parameters for looking at who to involve in the renaming review? So if it's a conversation, again, I think part of the concern is that when we talk about this, we talk about renaming a school versus a renaming process. We're just engaging in the process, in my opinion. I might be wrong. We're engaging in the process, which is the discussion, but we're conflating it or making it difficult to see because we often talk about we're going to rename the school. So I think recognizing that we are just going into the process, looking at what we are doing to find a means to an end. As Trustee Baxter said, 100% we want to get rid of harmful and hurtful language and discriminatory words. And I look at this and I think, can this not be used to inform the committee that we're forming? So that's just how we can find somewhere down the middle. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Shuttleworth. And as there are no other speakers on the list, I just want to say regarding a motion to defer or refer to a committee, a little maxim comes to mind when I think about this, and that is justice delayed is justice denied. And that means that if relief to an injured party is available, but purposely delayed, it is the same as having no remedy at all. And because of that, and because in my heart, and what I've heard around this table, everyone agrees the school should be renamed. If everyone agrees the school should be renamed, then the deferral becomes moot, especially since we know we don't have to spend the dollars immediately. And so for that reason, I cannot support a deferral. And seeing no further speakers on the list, unless you wish to close with a statement, Trustee Rocha.
I do wish to close with a statement. So just to counter, so Trustee Oliver, yes, I do understand it's a derogatory term. I think we all understand that. To the point of Trustee Amos sharing the history, thank you for sharing that. I would have expected to see that in the report, not a verbal update from you, but I appreciate it. And it goes back to when we get these reports, we need to get fulsome reports. As to by December 31st, I'm being generous. It could be next month. I put in a date so that it could come at any time before then. So let's not think of December 31st. And to causing harm. So the person who made the request to rename the school wasn't a member of our community, of the Indigenous community. So when we talk about we've caused harm, the Indigenous, I know we're being proactive, but it wasn't the Indigenous community that came to us with this request. We have an Indigenous team. Not once have we heard from them saying our school names are harmful. And I would hope that the Indigenous team would let us know which names are harmful. So we're not sitting around this table having this debate. And that goes with any name of our school. So to say we caused harm, I wouldn't say we caused harm. We're aware of the harm. And I'm not saying not to rename it. I think we need to give this more thought as to how we can approach the renaming. And to go back to Trustee Shuttleworth's question about the motion, the original motion, the initiating the renaming of the process is a committee will be formed. They will come up with suggestions. So the next time we see this, we will have 3 to 5 new names on a piece of paper. And we will be asked to choose from one of them or to send it back and give us another go round. So that's what the main motion is. So I wanted to clear that up before we voted on the motion I made. Thank you.
Did you wish to speak, Director Ennis?
Yes, no, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Trustee Rocha, the requester did not identify themselves, and so I think it would not be wise for us to assume that they don't identify as Indigenous.
Okay, so I'm going to put the motion on the machine for people to vote on. Just give me a second. Please cast your votes. And that is not unanimous. The yes votes for that are Trustee Zhang and Trustee Baxter, and the no votes are Trustee Amos, Trustee Daniele, Trustee Ahmed, Trustee Bryden, Trustee Gray, Trustee Collard, and Trustee Shuttleworth. Yes?
I voted yes, and my name's not on there.
Okay. Another yes vote is Trustee Rocha, and we seem to be missing one student vote and another trustee. Which trustee are we missing? If you see your name's not there, shout out. Oh, Trustee Oliver.
My name's not there.
Trustee Oliver. And yes, I can see you voted no. I can see it. I don't know why it didn't record them. Trustee Sherbalin. Okay, so Trustee Sherbalin also voted no. Vice Chair Oliver voted no, and Trustee Rocha voted yes. I'm not sure why it didn't record them all because they all show as checked off here, so I don't know why. So that motion does not carry. Back to the original motion. And I'll read it again. Be it resolved that the board initiate the renaming process for the secondary school at 1123 Glen Ashton Drive, Oakville, in accordance with the board's naming and renaming schools policy and governance procedure. Please cast your votes. Oh, okay. Do people still wish to speak, the ones that were on the speakers list before? Okay, I will cancel the voting. We will go back. My apologies. Okay, I'm sorry, Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I'm kind of lost in the moment because we've gone so many different directions. But I'm coming back to the motion or the discussion that Tanya spoke of that we had. Did we figure it was November of 2021? December of 2021. And my concern there is that having that knowledge and understanding is that proactive approach that we are speaking of. And I again, it's not about spending the money yet, but it's just knowing what's out there. So knowing what's out there. So I do have concern with the idea of not re-exploring that. And I do think that at our next meeting that I might take a look, and hopefully Trustee Rocha will help me with that, is taking a look at bringing that motion or whatever it was back to the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Shuttleworth. And now, seeing no other speakers on the speakers list, and I am looking fervently because I don't want to make the same mistake twice, I am going to take us back to the motion, set the topic, and ask everyone to vote, please. Thank you very much, and that is not unanimous. Voting in favor is Trustee Amos, Trustee Daniele, Trustee Ahmed, Trustee Bryden, Trustee Gray, myself, Trustee Shuttleworth, Trustee Baxter, and Vice Chair Oliver. Voting against Trustee Zhang and Trustee Rocha. Thank you very much, everyone, as well as the student trustees both voted in favor. Thank you. Now I'd like to call like a 5-minute recess because I